Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, flying solo today due to some scheduling issues caused by myself. But no problem, I, as always, have plenty to talk about. And I want to build upon our episode yesterday, where on Sunday, where we reviewed the West Ham match and talk a bit about Simon Rusk and how the simplicity that he has brought back to being a manager of football is refreshing and exactly what we needed. Now, I talk a lot on the show about how philosophies in football ruin football, and maybe that's oversimplifying it a bit. I think that you definitely need to have a style of football that you want to play that you can use as your base and build upon. I just don't think you can perpetually have a system that you're going to stick to 100% of the time and expect it to work, because whenever you play that singular way, managers are going to come out and counter it and find you out and find out how to play against you. And we've seen that a bit with Pep Guardiola and Man City this season. Especially through they've still had the star power this season. They've still had the players. Sure, they've been hit with some injuries, but I think people have just figured them out a bit. They know where the attacks are going to come from. They know where some of their vulnerabilities are. They've been able to press back and push on and get results against them. And that's, I think, why we've seen Russ come back and be a bit more successful, because he's not pushing this heavy metal football. He's not pushing this possession-based football from Russell Martin. And do we see bits of both of those philosophies in his style? Yeah, because that's the team that's been training those ways this season. We still see, Russ liking to knock the ball around at the back a bit. That's fine. It's the sticking to that 100% of the time and not having a plan that isn't that's upsetting. I watched an interview today with Sir Alex Ferguson, and he was arguably, maybe not even arguably, the greatest football manager of all time. And he was saying how important it was to him that if you're a goal behind in the 80th minute, that you're not just sitting back and leaving your four defenders and your four midfielders and your two attackers in their positions doing their thing. He wants to push the attackers into the box and push the big defenders up into the box. Just stick players in the box and give them something, to try and whip the ball in at and try and create something and try and attack, because then the opposition reacts to that also, and then they're out of position and you've got more of a chance of creating something. And that is something that we have really struggled with this season. How many times have we come onto the podcast and said that there's just no urgency, there's no upping the pace. They just stick to that same plan, knock the ball around a bit, try and build up the play. And that is not always going to work. Even if you take the argument of, the players weren't good enough for the system, and all of that, I think the fact that Man City have had as bad of a season as they had, comparatively, right, because where we are in the table compared to even on their bad year where they are in the table, but it's beatable. And if you stick to the same thing, that's going to happen regardless of how good the players are. You need to be able to switch up. You need the versatility. And that is what I think is the most important thing we should be looking for in a manager as we build it forward. We want to be able to change and adapt as the game goes on. Because not only to put ourselves in a situation where we could be that team attacking in the 80th minute to put defenders up in the box and cause mayhem and get that late goal, but also because if it happened the other way, that's why we're so susceptible to late finishes. Ipswich was one example that jumps out of the brain of one late goal that we conceded, and it's been a story all season. We're not good enough late in the game because we can't adapt. We're still stuck. And I know that there's a lot to do with fitness as well, which is another frustrating thing as a fan to look at. You look at these players on hundreds of thousands of pounds not being able to play for a full 90 minutes. It's frustrating. And I get the intensity in the Premier League is completely different, but that is a frustration point. But that versatility is so important. And, I know that now we're generations of Man United teams away from Alex Ferguson. And yet, on Thursday night, what we saw was one of the most ridiculous games of football I've ever watched, where Harry Maguire, of all people, gets himself up in the box and is creating mayhem and frees himself up for a header. And that's just not a response you could ever see this Southampton team having to any sort of setback or anything. There's none of that push. There's none of that ability to change. It's always the same, and that's why our substitutions have been so bad. I will come back and add to that point further, but it's definitely time for a break. And I meant word from our partners at Bioniq.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements, designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Okay, and I am back. So I wanted to touch on our substitutions and why that has been a problem. And there's several reasons. Now, obviously, we've talked at length about the depth of our squad and the quality, and honestly, there is some of that. We as a team are not a strong squad with depth. We have a big bloated squad of lots of players who may be good in spells, is probably the fairest way of putting it, but are not quite there. They're definitely not all there fitness-wise. We've been, hit with swathes of injuries, and that's not to mention suspensions of key players such as Jack Stevens or Flynn Downs. And, Stevens is an easy scapegoat sometimes, but it's clear that he is an important player to all of the managers we've had this season and the way they play. So for him to have been out with suspension so much was obviously costly. And while there is an element of that strength and that depth being the problem, actually, it's the rigidity of the system that has mostly caused the problems. It is the inability to adjust or adapt to the game. Because when you're thinking, especially the way Russell Martin wanted to play football, you're thinking, I need to pass and move and make this pass and make this run. The most common move we saw was one of the central defenders running in from the middle of the field to pick up the short pass from the goalkeeper, who was then dragging the plan being to drag one of their midfielders out with him so he could immediately ping the ball off to a centre-back who can then utilise that space to pass it forward through the lines and get there. But the problem is, once you do that 2 or 3 times in a game, the other team adjust to it. They adapt. They know that that's the space you're trying to get to. They block it off. And then the ball, in that situation, pings off to the centre-back. He doesn't have that forward pass option. He either makes that pass and it gets intercepted and it leads to a mistake and a goal, or it gets recycled and we do the same thing and rinse and repeat. We don't adapt. There's no other options. That's still the first thing in their head. Oh, get it back to the goalkeeper, make this run, bing, 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 bing. Just the same thing. And we've talked a lot about Russell Martin's style of football. I don't want to harp on it too much, and how it was very much Einstein's definition of insanity, just doing the same thing over and over again and it never working. But we saw similar with Juric. We saw this man-for-man style for a while, which was interesting, and it sort of worked in some cases, but then as soon as one substitution changed things, we weren't able to adapt. It was completely different. Everything went out the window. We made mistakes. The players weren't good enough. Conceded goals. Heads dropped. It's just game over. And it's just this inability to change up from those systems, right? Because you can see a system where all of those things work some of the time in football, right? A man marking system will work against some oppositions some of the time. Sometimes that's going to be the best play. Passing out from the back is a really solid philosophy and a really solid thought path of how you want to approach a game of football, maybe some of the time. But actually, it's almost like they're playing checkers when actually football's the game of chess, right? Because when I was at chess club at school, I was not a very good chess player, and I still am not a very good chess player. But I knew how to do checkmate in 4 moves. Once that strategy was removed from me and was countered, I had nothing else left. Like, I had no real deep strategical thoughts in my brain. I had 4-move checkmate, and if that didn't work, I was lost at sea. And that is the perfect analogy for what has happened to Saints this season. If that style worked, great, we were there. Once that didn't work, we didn't have anything else left in the bank to try. We would not let's pass it around at the back and see if we can break their lines. Oh, that hasn't worked. Let's pass it around at the back and see if we can break their lines again. That hasn't worked. There's no let's ping the ball out this once and see. There's no mixing it up. And then we saw a lot with Juric ping the ball up. And it's like, Paul's not having a great game. Everything is bouncing off him in a way that's heading straight to a defender. Can we change it up? No, we're stuck in this system and that is all we've got. Can we bring on quality? Arguably, we bring on the likes of Cameron Archer. Do we change our game to adapt to that player's strengths? No, we just try and do the same thing and then wonder why it doesn't work. It's being stuck in those ways that has got us in trouble this season, and that's why I think it's the most important thing for me looking for next season and looking to the manager is the fundamentals and the basics. If you want to root that in a philosophy, that's fine. But we need to be able to adapt to a situation and look at a game tactically and play that game of chess strategically against the other manager. Now, sometimes that looks like 4-move checkmate, right? That looks like, we've successfully passed the ball around the back, kept a clean sheet, broke the line 3 times, scored 3 goals. Bish, bash, bosh, job done. 4-move checkmate. Sometimes you need to change it up completely, look completely different, do something different. Sometimes that's running in behind. Sometimes that's playing that ball over the top for the hold-up play for a ping-off. If there was a right answer to how to play football would be a very boring game, and Sky and people who watch football wouldn't pay all of the money that they pay to watch football. It is a simple game at its essence, and we break it down into its simplest forms on this show on many occasions. You kick the ball at the goal. If it goes in, you win. But there are more layers of complexity to it than that. And because of those layers of complexity, there is no one single answer that is going to solve that problem for every game, solve that problem for every opposition, even solve that problem for every part of every game. That solution needs to be malleable and needs to be able to change. I'm going to go further with that and talk about what I want to see next season and if those managers really exist anymore and if that's going to come back into fashion. But first, a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. Okay, so I'm back. And how does this apply to next season is the next question I want to answer, right? Because obviously versatility and tactical management are going to be key. Are any of the names on the list about that style? I certainly am not qualified enough to know. I know that Zach is going to be trying to run a series of our potential candidates, and maybe he will be able to touch on those values and how important they are to managers a bit more. I guess a better question on a more broad scale is, do that type of manager exist anymore? And the answer is yes, to some degree. Lots of managers get caught up in this Pepism, and we've talked about it on this show, right, about this philosophy, and aren't as good at doing it, and that is why so many teams struggle. That's why we see the revolving door of managers so much. Players, what mentality can you achieve trying the same thing again? Or if you change managers, like we've talked about, the drastic change and shift in the way the players have been asked to play between the start of the season and the middle of the season. And it's needed this taking it back to basics and back to the fundamentals for us to even look like a team that can play football. Because once a player is set in those ways, that is going to become the muscle memory, and you need to prevent that from happening. You need to breed in this versatility, breed in this adaptivity. It's where focusing on players with football intelligence becomes so key and so important. Do we have some of those players? Absolutely we do. I think that Taylor Harwood-Bellis and Flynn Downs are both examples of that, and that's arguably why they worked so well in Russell Martin's system, because they have the ability to make these passes and play that style and think that style first, but actually their read of the game to get themselves into those positions is very good, and that's why they were so successful at it. And so, under a manager that's going to breed that football intelligence and that versatility into a team, hopefully that can be the basis of what we can build to go on and be a successful first of all championship team, and then hopefully a reasonably successful Premier League team. No, I mean, to be fair, success at that point is staying in the league. So is it achievable? 100%, and we're seeing that because or we're starting to feel that because of the success that Rusk is having going back to basics and fundamentals. Is fundamentals enough? Is going back to basics and going back to the fundamentals enough? No, but that's why they're the fundamentals, right? They are the foundation that you build the rest of your plan on. It's the sort of thing that if Adam Lallana had enough legs to run, he would be very good at, because his intelligence, so you can see on the football pitch that he is so aware and so intelligent of his surroundings and the things that are happening. And so if he had the legs to run and do the things that he can see happening, then he'd be fantastic. And that's why I think as an assistant coach, he's going to be doing so much valuable work building that intelligence with players. It's why you see players like Tyler Diblin have banded with so much potential, because he has a bit of that about him. He has the intelligence to see a bit of the game in that way and pick up the ball and take on 2 or 3 players, and the confidence to do it. He's not a finished product, he's not a finished article. He has things that he needs to work on, shooting and that final product, and sometimes releasing the ball earlier are the 2 things for me that stand out as things that he needs to improve on. But I think that we should see that next season. I think that 100 million price tag is nothing more than a statement saying, not for sale. I don't think anyone in their right mind is paying that for an 18-year-old who isn't even the top scorer in the worst Premier League team in history, or joint worst Premier League team in history currently. It's going to be such an interesting summer. And it starts with that recruitment of the manager, and whoever comes in, I'm sure that they'll bring all of their staff and whoever with them, because that is the way it seems to work these days. But I hope that we see Adam Lallana utilised for where his strengths are going to be in breeding that football intelligence. I hope that we see a manager brought in who has that tactical awareness, that chess level of thinking towards the game. And hopefully we can just go on and do good things. That's all we can hope for. Next season is definitely going to be a better season than this season. We're going to be in a league where we should win games. It's a much more enjoyable league in general anyway. We talked about at the weekend how all of the teams could still go up or down. There was no teams confirmed. Although one thing that has come out since then is that Portsmouth's win today confirms that they are also definitely in the Championship next season. So we've got a confirmed South Coast derby. That's another positive too. I just don't want it to be a waste. I hope that we can instill these foundations, build upon them, build a versatile team who can adapt to situations. Part of that adaptation comes with mentality. We need a mentality shift because that is something we've really struggled with this season, whether that comes in the form of some sort of sports psychology or just, general approach to the game. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that. If I had the answer to that, I'd be being paid the big bucks to do it for them rather than sat here talking to you. But they're the key areas we need to focus on. And, the obvious things. We need someone who can kick the ball in the goal, but doesn't everybody. We need that versatility. We need to be adaptable. We need to be fit enough to play the whole game and be adaptable. We need a squad that can change shapes and styles. We need to turn back time and go back to it. Back in the day, it was a 4-4-2 and there was these battles, but it was never as simple as that because you move the players around the pitch, you have an answer for what the team puts in front of you. And I know in the Championship we're going to say, we should be taking our game to them. We should be the bigger team and making them adapt to us. But that's just never going to be good enough. We need to adapt as well. We need to be targeting certain areas of weakness. We need to be targeting certain areas to build upon in strength. The example we go back to frequently is the naivety we had earlier on in the season, where I thought Russell Martin had doubled up on Saka as like part of Arsenal's key attack. He just put 2 players on him. It just happened that was just how he wanted to shoehorn his team together that day. But that's the sort of versatility we want to look for. I want to see us, we're playing a big team. We've got, if we're playing Liverpool or someone in the cup, just stick 2 men on Salah. We want to be able to adapt to those situations. And if we can adapt, then that's our strength. Because if the opposition doesn't know what's coming, then they're going to struggle to adapt to us. We need that. That, to me, is my philosophy on football and how we can best go about improving the Championship. And I hope that the club aligns with that. But I'm very excited to see how that plays out. That is just about all I've got time for today. Thank you very much for listening to me talk about my philosophy on football and how I think we can improve where it's gone this season. Hopefully next season will be so much better, and I cannot wait to share it with you all and be here for the ride. We will be back tomorrow with some wildcard content. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.